should do another video in the dark, but I decided to do it in the light because I was working. I was in the light. I was just listening to good old Sargy once again. I don't know what's up with me listening to Sargy as of late, but this one was interesting. The title of the video is "My Fall from Liberalism" or something like that. And he says something that is very, very interesting at this point. And I actually was so surprised, not surprised, but affected by what he said, that I decided I'm going to react to this. He may actually later explain this and solve it in some other way, but I haven't listened to it later, so I don't know. But I'm going to react to what he's about to say now, because it's one of the stupidest things I have ever heard, and I'll demonstrate it to you. So, off you go, Carl.
Because liberalism doesn't see groups of people, and it doesn't care about cultural particularity. Liberalism interpolates each person as being an atomic individual who exists prior to society. And so
I don't think the word interpolates means what you think it means, or at least as I know it, it's a mathematical concept. So it might be my own personal bias. I think he meant to say interprets. But, okay, so he has said that liberalism essentially sees an individual as an atom and sees an individual as preceding society, which is, by the way, a term I don't accept as existing, personally. In fact, earlier he said group, now he said society. He means the same thing, I think. It's a bit of a sleight of hand, but we'll let that slide. Okay.
by stripping away the cultural particulars of each person and putting them down to their essence. What is a man? Well, he's a rational animal. He must eat, he must sleep, he must have a family, maybe. In fact, that's not even guaranteed in the liberal order, to be honest. He must eat, he must sleep, he must have shelter. Well, and possibly occupation. Okay, well, that's the essence of a human being. That's what the universal man is.
Okay, just a moment. So, to my knowledge, in the liberal view, which I think you're describing the libertarian, what today is understood as libertarian, the liberal view says that a man mustn't eat, mustn't sleep, does whatever, like, these are biological imperatives, like many others, and that's why he talks about the family as well. Like, reproduction will be another biological imperative of any animal. It's got nothing to do with a human. He talks about the particulars of the culture. That is such murky ground to tread. The mere fact that I'm speaking in English right now, in a country that doesn't speak English, coming from a place where I didn't originally speak English, listen to an Englishman, there's quite a lot of movement. Culture is very real, but very changeable, very, very, very subject to modification. But anyway, I kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole I didn't necessarily want to go down, but that's how my cookie up here crumbles. There's another bit now he's going to say. So he has defined for us the man. He has declared as a dogma that society or the group comes before the man. And he has explained that man is essentially, that would be his interpretation of the liberal vision. Man is an animal. Okay. Carry on.
And therefore, everything beyond that is contingent. Everything beyond that is choice. And that means I can just choose to...
Contingent and choice are not synonyms, but okay.
abandon all of that and just choose to integrate into another culture, if I so want. Which is not how any of it works. Because actually there is no universal man. There is no pre-social man. There is no man born before society, who exists before society and makes the rational decision to sign a social contract and enter into society. There's just no such thing. In fact, in reality, every person is born into a web of relations, which are a series of obligations and entitlements that they have, whether they like it or not. You will always be your father's son. You will always be your mother's son or daughter. You will always have uncles and aunties and neighbours and friends and a community around you. You will always be a part of something that exists somewhere, whether you like it or not.
False. Categorically. Absolutely and totally false. First of all, it is not true at all that the choice doesn't play a part in this, and that's not how it works. You might be born in a web of relationships, as you yourself have stated because you've played Persona 4 too much. But it doesn't mean you, at some point, when you are old enough to make your own decision, you can sever almost all of these connections. For example, a father can deny the existence of a child. One could argue that that is deception. I wouldn't disagree. But it's entirely possible to do that. And it happens on the regular. All illegitimate children all over the place. All of the out of wedlock kids that are born that don't even know who their father is, and then never will, or at least it's very unlikely that they will. Now, I'm not attempting to put undue importance over this, but the problem is, or this specific thing, the problem is that Carl here talks in absolutes. And the thing that liberalism is consistent with is the fact that it's difficult to work with absolutes. Basically, he declares that it is true that you are born in a web of relationships. And that is just a fact, and it's an inescapable fact. Well, I mean, it's an inescapable fact that you have exited a woman's womb and you're now here, right? And that you are connected genetically with this individual as well as the father. But it's entirely possible for you to be entirely unaware of this. In fact, then you grow up in a different web of relationships. And it is entirely possible later in life, or even early in life, to sever the relationships and make decisions that are cataclysmic for said relationships. For example, I was born in a country, Yugoslavia, that ceased to exist 6 years in my life, and it became Slovenia. But I was of Italian mother, so it was quite a mess, because over there, culturally, it becomes very complicated. And then I moved to Italy, severing all connections that I had prior with Slovenia. In fact, so much so, and this would have been, what age would I have been when I went to Italy? It would have been 14, right? I'm now 41, so my figures are reversed. So much so, I was saying, that in these 30 years, I do not think I know a single person in Slovenia, meaningfully. I have an aunt that lives somewhere there, I think. And I talked to her last year once after I hadn't talked to her for 30 years, maybe an exaggeration, but I don't think it's an excessive one. I have no relationship with this individual. She has 2 children, has 2 cousins. I have no relationship with them either. On my father's side, I also have another aunt, and I have no relationship with her, and she has 1 daughter, and I have no relationship with her either. I have no connection at all with my family. Now, one could argue this is a loss, or it's a bad decision, whatever. I don't necessarily even disagree. But this is how life went. Pantare, it's too much moves. Too many variables shift and change in order for one to be as rigid as Carl suggests life is. Now, of course, I'm a bit of an extreme example. I'm somebody who has traveled to move, not in the sense traveled to visit. Right? I've traveled to move more than most people I know. Though I suppose now where I live, there's a bunch of expats, and expats connect to expats, and they themselves form this strange culture of almost modern nomads, right? In a way. But so culture is too flexible a term. And Carl sees it as a very strong pillar, a thing. But it is an incredibly myopic view on his part. And this myopia, ironic considering how much he's interested in history, this myopia is caused by the paradigm in which he lives. Italy, for example, is a fascinating country because it's one of the few countries that I'm aware of that has something called dialects. Now, dialects are essentially different languages per location, and I'm talking about an insane level of granularity. So if you, for example, come from the extreme northeast, you speak not only Italian, which is taught to you in school or by the national concept, you also speak a form of a dialect called Veneto, depending on when you're from, where you're from. So it could be Triestino or Veneziano or whatever, right? These are all different languages. I don't think they're classed as languages except the one in Udine. That one is called Friulano. That one is classed as a separate language. Now, this is a reality that's absurdly difficult for most people, in my experience, to understand, except possibly the Spanish, because they got the Basque reality. That's kind of how that works. So you have these meaningfully different languages within the same conceptual space, which is a nation. And they all coexist because the nation is so ancient that it's got these things, these phenomena. Now, what am I getting to? These phenomena are vanishing over time. I would argue that my generation would already be the first one that really gave up on these. I knew lots of students in my various classes that I attended when I was, adolescent and stuff, that didn't speak any dialects at all. They only spoke Italian. That's the official language of the nation, so that's how people communicated. But in the town I was in, which would have been Trieste at the time, lots of people locally spoke Triestino only. They spoke the dialect. So you'd enter a store and people would address you in that dialect. And if you were from Sicily, that was like, I have no idea what just happened. Is this my nation I'm in? I think so, right? But that's how it works. And we were the first generation, I think, or one of the first. Probably my parents would have been the first. But that's probably myopic as well. Anyway, finish the damn thought, Mike. Sorry. So we would have been the first that forgot this, stopped using it. I visited Trieste relatively recently, would have been 1-2 years ago, and I was surprised to still find it there. So it's kind of still there. It's definitely diminishing, but it's still there. More than I expected. I expected it to be gone completely. So my point is that culture, and as he likes to call it, society, is an ever-evolving mess of atoms, or molecules, if you will. Family stuff. And it is like trying to nail Jello. It's not really possible to argue this is what Englishness is or Italianness is. In fact, in Italy it's complete nonsense because it changes from location to location. And I know that it happens in England as well. They may not have the dialects, but they have the different accents and different tones. You could argue that the Scottish speak so differently that you could potentially call it a dialect. And there's a very fundamental difference between Edinburgh, for example, and Glasgow. They speak differently, right? So, meaningfully differently. Different tone, different expressions and stuff. Still English, but you know, it is not possible to argue the way Carl is, that this is monolithic, that this is static, because it isn't. It moves all the darn time. So that's point number one. Then point number two, add the fact that literally everybody does whatever the heck they want. And that is something that only liberalism meaningfully acknowledges, I think. The liberalism he's talking about. Whereas a different view, generally, a collectivist view, is extremely inelastic from this perspective, and it does not allow for this. He is categorically wrong because he knows nothing from this perspective, but unless I misunderstood him. But I think he's categorically wrong, if I understood him correctly, that people don't choose to go. They absolutely do. I did. I changed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times actively and alone against other people's wishes where to go. And integrated is a strong word. I don't like to integrate because I don't like collectives. But I have lived among other people in peace, making friends everywhere I went, by choice. And I went to all sorts of different places. This last place that I went to, I didn't even speak the language. I just went. Do you know how I did it? I bought a property there and went. That's how I did it. In fact, I think that while his idea, he means well. He means well because he's concerned about the fact that there's all sorts of valuable loss, cultural loss, caused by this open-mindedness that I'm describing. Perhaps this is too charitable a term, more like this wishy-washiness, perhaps, that I certainly would argue I have about culture. Or lack of respect, there you go. Is damaging the structure of said culture, of the target culture. I don't think that's incorrect as an observation. The problem is whether it's correct or incorrect is irrelevant, because it is impossible to control the cats. The cats are going wherever they like and doing whatever they like. Therefore, the liberal concept, which says, so long as the laws are respected, there is nothing tying you to anything unless you choose to be tied to it. You can move. And moving is kind of the ultimate expression of these changes, of these cultural changes. I've done it. Lots of people I know have done it. This doesn't mean that we've given up on our parents or lost our parents or whatever. But for instance, one thing I've done is I've transplanted my parents from Italy to here. That is very different as a concept. It's something he doesn't even imagine, based on what I'm observing now, as an existing possibility. Well, he's wrong. Because the problem is, there's a million possibilities out there. There are possibilities that none of us has yet conceived of. That's just how it works. Because people make their own decisions, and their own decisions then cause ripple effects on all sorts of stuff. I am very much of the opinion that culture naturally will shift. And now that the Americans have led the way culturally in terms of them showing to everybody how they're better than everybody else for a very, very, very long time now, is now showing all of its ripple effect. Showing is the word, by the way. It's not having the effect. It might still be having some effect, but nowhere near as strong as it was back in the day. Right? When everybody would have been listening to Bob Dylan or something. English in and of itself became lingua franca, somewhat ironically, for the level of animus that exists between the French and the English, though I suspect it's merely nominal by now. But the English has become an incredibly common language now. I am not English mother tongue, and yet I can speak it fairly well by now, well enough to be to be broadcasting in said language and working in said language. Loads of people now speak it. Particularly the new generation that is consistently on the internet is incredibly proficient in the English language. Everywhere, in every nation. You could argue this is having a very severely negative impact on the resistance of a local culture. I think this would be an accurate observation. However, the implication of the observation is that this is a negative thing. It's a fundamentally conservative point of view. While I concede that it may have some merit, I don't think it's stoppable. It never was. That's what I mean by myopic. Whenever anybody could travel, they would. Anybody entrepreneurial enough and exploratory enough that they would go and travel somewhere else would. And they would discover new places and found new places and modify the places that are there. Just look at what the colonialism phenomenon. Just look at what the Brits did to India. And now that India is reverting back to being Indian, it's becoming a rather inhospitable place for any, what's the word, human that doesn't want to vomit after every corner. At least that's what I'm understanding from it, based on Bold and Bankrupt videos and that sort of stuff. Carl is absolutely wrong. I'm happy that he has abandoned the liberalist view that is, like I said, wishy-washy. It's not intransigent to any degree and doesn't essentially concede that there is such a thing as this collective existence, right? The collective existence exists, but it's much more tenuous than what anybody would argue. It really depends on how conservative you are in your mindset. If you decide you want to leave and change things, sure you do. And there's absolutely nothing there to stop you. If the argument he's making is that there should be something to stop you, he's wrong. He's stating, I think, I might be misrepresenting him, but I don't think I am. I think he's stating that these ties, these invisible ties between people that the liberal individual does not acknowledge, or the liberal mindset does not acknowledge, not only do they exist, but they are very, very powerful. And metaphysical relationships, of course, exist. Arguing that they don't is silly, but arguing that they are unbreakable is also silly. It is all of this is breakable. All of this is changeable. In fact, all of this changes all the time. Now, it's changing in a way that is extremely undesirable right now because, for instance, crime is not punished, just as a general thing. Only crime of a certain kind is pursued and punished. Basically, nowadays, my personal observation is that the West punishes crime that's easy to punish, because the people who are being punished are generally acquiescing to the punishment. If a stereotypical white man gets caught speeding, the white man says, yeah, I was speeding. Yeah, the white man of good character is generally honest, right, and non-combative, right? Very different, as an example, with black folk in America. And of course, by black folk, I don't mean black folk dressed in a suit and tie. I'm not talking about Oreos. I'm talking about the word that shan't be named, but we're all thinking collectively. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm surprised at the level of potentially misplaced eloquence that Carl Benjamin is engaging in right now while being so catastrophically wrong. So close-minded. It's surprising. But it's not surprising. That is one of the reasons why I, long ago, had abandoned any interest in listening to anything he had to say. I even remember exactly when it happened. He had done a video with Lauren Southern back in the day when Lauren Southern was not this peculiar persona non grata that she is right now. I'm not really sure what's going on there. But she had said, because she was a libertarian at the time, she had said that in her opinion, if a store wants to discriminate against blondes and not sell them something, that's the store's right. And I remember Carl Benjamin, without skipping a bit, said, no, I think that's wrong. Didn't provide an argument. That's just what he said. And I believe both of them would have espoused the liberal point of view. Only she, in that case, was the more intellectually coherent one, whereas he was not. And that made me lose a lot of respect for this man. I mean, this man has built an empire of information. Lots of people have listened to him, including myself. So one must respect results. There is no alternative to that. But it doesn't mean I have to respect his intellect. And in this particular case, I'm afraid it's another faux pas. So I shall now bid you farewell after a fairly long rambling. But yeah, no bueno. Bye.